Christian parenting.
Like grief has been the greatest teacher for me when it comes to prayer, because grief really showed me like I had nothing and I was struggling and I was hurting, and yet the invitation remained and God was there.
Hey, welcome back, families, to the Call to Love podcast. I am so grateful that you have chosen to spend the next few moments with us, where I'm so privileged every week just to come and sit with you and talk about the practical, the clinical, and always, most importantly, the biblical aspects surrounding the foster care and adoption callings. And y'all, we are so privileged to have back-to-back episodes where we are going to be talking about resources specifically for our kids and to equip you in healthy conversations and guiding your children. And so today we are continuing on in that conversation with my guest, Tanner Olson. He is an author, poet, speaker, and adoptive dad. And so I'm super excited to share with you about a beautiful book that he has written called All the Things That I Say to God, to help families teach their children how to talk to God. So Tanner, I'm excited to have you. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I am super excited to talk about the book with you.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I want to dive into your story and just the fact that you're an adoptive dad. It was so fantastic. We have an audience, a mixture of moms and dads, primarily moms. And so a lot of my guests tend to be more female. So I'm always
Mhm.
excited to have a gentleman come on and share from that adoptive dad's perspective and all of the things that go with that. So I would love to dive into some of that. But let's just start by allowing our listeners just to get to know you a little bit better today.
Great. Yeah. My name is Tanner Olson. When people say, ask, what do you do? I tell them I'm an author, a spoken word poet, a speaker. I just do a lot of things with words. For the last 12 years, I've been writing and putting words on the internet and traveling around the country and hosting evenings of music and poetry. I don't play music, but my friends do. So
Okay.
it's music, it's poetry, it's storytelling, it's partially stand-up comedy, but we don't brand it like that because it's a lot of pressure,
Right.
just a lot.
Yeah.
So I just do a lot of things with words and storytelling, and hopefully the main reason why I do what I do is to spread hope and to invite people to know that they are loved by God, that they are
Mm.
seen by God, and that everything one day is going to be okay.
Okay, that sounds like the coolest job ever. Like, how did that even honestly, that is so fun. How did the
I,
Lord call you into that? How'd you get here?
I just started. So the backstory, the long story short, I went to college to do for ministry. But I did not know what kind of ministry I really wanted to do. So I grew up in Florida, and then I went to a college in Wisconsin. In my freshman year, I was changing my major like every other week. Like one week I was going to be a pastor. The next week was going to be a youth leader. The next week was going to be an English teacher. The week after that was going to be a PE teacher because I really got into sweatpants. All I really knew was that I was going to be poor, but I just didn't know how. And so
Yep.
then my sophomore year of college, I went to a concert, and there was a spoken word poet there. His name is Anis Mojgani. And it just like something inside of me unlocked and clicked. And I was like, that's how I'm going to be poor, like through poetry. Like,
I love how
and
you
so
frame that.
I just really, I love words. But really what I love most is um, how words can move us and heal us and
Yeah.
shake us and shift us. And they can leave us different. But the type of poetry that I do, like spoken word, and the stories that I tell, it's not a sermon, it's not a song, but it just kind of lives somewhere in between. But I have found that through others' stories, through others' art, like it brings us alive. It reminds us that not only is God creative, but we get to live out that creativity as well.
Yeah.
And something just happens when we just sit with what is, with our stories, with our words, with our feelings. And I think that can really it can just change everything for us. And so I love to be kind of a facilitator of that. Um, and also I have no idea what else I would do with my life. Like my
Right.
goal was to be in the NBA, and that just didn't work out. So poetry
Yeah.
it was.
Poetry in from NBA to portrait. Hey, I love that. And he's
Yeah.
obviously using you so well in this. And I'm
Yeah.
just amazed. And again, just coolest job ever. Not new goals in my life. But that is so fun. And but a big part, I love what you talk about just, using those words to share your stories, because ultimately as believers, that's what we do. The way that we live our lives is meant to share the story of what God is doing in and through us. And
Mhm.
so a big part of your story is surrounding adoption. So tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about your adoption story and how the Lord led you to become an adoptive dad.
Yeah, so my wife and I, we were married in 2016, and in 2019 we decided it was time for us to start trying to have a family.
Mhm.
And so we tried and we waited and we prayed and we tried and we waited and prayed. And about a year and a half later, we were diagnosed with unexplained infertility, uh, which after all these tests and doctor appointments, you get to the end of it and they're like, well, everything's fine. We just don't know why.
Yeah,
And so that kind of led us into this season of grief, of uncertainty. We spent a lot of time asking God how and why. And I think it's important to spend time asking how and why.
sure.
But then we eventually began praying and asking God, what's next? And we just had all these beautiful conversations with friends, uh, with spiritual leaders, and it just kept coming back to adoption for us. Um, and there was a couple of clear moments where we knew, like, okay, this is the next right thing.
Mm.
So we started doing all the paperwork and jumped into the process. We worked with an organization called Lifeline Children's Services based out of
Yes, I'm
Birmingham.
familiar. Yes.
Big fans. We love them. And they were so kind and gracious and helpful through the process. My wife always jokes that, like, going through the adoption process is like getting your master's.
That's
It
so
is like,
true.
it's like a whole new world. It's new language, it's new schooling. But the thing that really carried us through all the waiting is, like, we knew that God created us to be parents somehow, some way.
Mm.
We just didn't know how. Um, and so we just kept trusting and falling forward and staying hopeful. And then, as for people who are listening with fostering, like, in adoption, like, there are some real low points. Like, you didn't know how low it could get.
Yeah.
I remember for us, like, our lowest point was Halloween. Halloween. And I thought, like, of all the holidays, like, I don't care about Halloween. I'm a
Right.
candy person, but I'm not like a scary kind of person. I
Sure.
hope I'm not a scary kind of person. I don't like scary things.
Right.
Um, I love Christmas. Thanksgiving is right up there. Like, I'll even take St. Patrick's Day,
You
whatever,
bet.
right? But, like, not Halloween. But for some reason, that uh, October 31st, 2023 was just the hardest day.
Mm.
We were both on the couch like, why is today so hard? I don't know if maybe it was because all the people were posting photos. Also, the internet is the worst place when you want to have a family and you
That's
can't
so
have one.
true. Yep.
But it was maybe it's all the families dressed up in their costumes and doing something. We just wanted to be part of that. Um, and then on November 5th, it was a Sunday morning, we got a phone call that we had been chosen to be parents. So it was like
Wow.
right after the lowest point, like we were at the end of our rope, and then we got a phone call, and we were, our our adoption agency told us, "Hey, your child's being born today. Are you ready?" And
Yeah.
the answer was, like, absolutely not, but
Are
yes,
we ever
100%.
ready?
No, yeah, it was crazy. All we had was a car seat. Our friends came over and helped with everything. They brought over all the things we need and the things they no longer wanted, which, I mean, great move for them to get rid of some clutter in their house and to bring it
No
to us.
kidding.
But it
Win-win.
was it was so. I mean, and then later that night we found out it was a boy, and then we went and saw him the next day, and Judah came home with us on Tuesday, and it was the sweetest, most beautiful, hardest, wonderful thing. And that was so that now he's like 17 months old, and it's wonderful. I am truly so thankful, and I will never get tired of telling the story.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fantastic. I love that. And we have some friends who experienced a very similar story, specifically with Lifeline. And it was like
Hmm.
you went from nothing to all of a sudden. And it's a whirlwind and all the things. And you're never ready. And you just dive in and you trust that the Lord's going to guide your path and all of that. I really appreciate you sharing that story, Taylor, because I think it is an important point for us to acknowledge. Many of our listeners are praying through the calling of adoption specifically and wondering if it's worth the journey and they might be walking through the pain of infertility. And so could you give us maybe just some words of encouragement? Even um, I don't like to paint things pretty. I do like to be honest on the show and allow people into the vulnerability of the experience of both infertility and adoption, because a lot of times we do see that go hand in hand. So can you speak into that and maybe just some words of encouragement from your experience related to both of those?
Yeah, because it's part of my job. Do you mind if I share a poem?
Please.
Okay. Usually during shows that I do, there comes a point in the show where I talk about what we're talking about, the adoption, the waiting, the wondering, the grief that comes along with it.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to write a poem that kind of captures all of that. It's called "You Cannot Make God Hurry Up," and it goes like this:
Hmm.
You cannot make God hurry up. He holds time in his hands, and his timing is perfect. But according to my watch, he's late. I
Yeah.
didn't choose the life I have, and the life I have isn't half bad, but I'm far from feeling whole, like there's a chip or crack somewhere in my soul. Dreams are disappearing as my reality is being reshaped. Grief and shame have found their way into the center frame. Breaks in my foundation have shifted what has come to be, but I know something more is happening than I can see. But right now, what I see is life slipping away from me. And I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. I'm not the only one who's tossing and turning at night, wondering if everything will be all right, asking God questions, beginning with when and why. I know I'm not the only one who's tired of feeling stuck or behind, like I'm standing in the wrong line, but I also know God is never far off. He's in the waiting, He's in the wondering, He is before me and behind, just like He's in the here and now, and He will be with us in the then and there. God is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, and you cannot make God hurry up. He does things differently. He's not punishing us or pushing us away, but He's right here staying the same, inviting us to trust and wait. You cannot make God hurry up, but you can join Him in the certain and slow, and God is slow until He isn't. So those are my thoughts kind of around,
Mm.
what do you do when you wait? Well, the hard answer is to trust.
Yeah.
But I also think part of the, like, what do you do while you wait, is you can lament, you can pray, certainly
Yeah.
pray, and you can be frustrated. I mean, my I have a friend who's a therapist. We all have friends who are therapists. I have a friend
Right.
who's a therapist, uh, like a legit one. But she's like, you can hold, more than one emotion at a time. And for the longest
Yeah.
time, I thought I could only be happy, I could only be sad, I could only first. But like, we are complex people, and we can hold there are a lot of things going on in us at once, and we don't have to stop that from happening,
Yeah.
but we can ground them in the understanding that there's a lot going on, yet God is still faithful. Life is still hard. I am hopeful, but I am hurting. I am waiting, I am trusting, I am frustrated, I am hope. We can be all these things at one time, and it gets hard. Hope is
Yeah.
a hard thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a hard
Yeah.
thing.
It absolutely is. Oh, that is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm taken aback by just the honesty and all of that, and I'm recognizing all of the feelings that you expressed just through that poem, and remembering my own moments of just collapsing on the kitchen floor and crying out because the waiting was so exhausting,
Yeah.
and the wondering, and then on the other side of the fulfillment of that adoption, the crying out in my closet and shaking my fists at God because I was so frustrated at how hard it
Hmm.
was. And so
Yeah.
I really appreciate you talking about that. And I think it is important for us to recognize that God created us as beings to carry all of these emotions. He created all the feels,
Yeah.
if you will. And so it doesn't have to be any set rule of how we
Hmm.
feel those and express those. And so I think that is important. And you make that crucial point of it all comes back to us talking to
Yeah.
God, that it's
Yeah.
not that our focus still stays with him as we're going through all the feels. And so, what does that look like, Tanner? Talking to God through, and what did that look like for you, for your wife, and how would you encourage even just the basic conversation with God as you're walking through the hard related to adoption or infertility?
Yeah. I think, you know, we when I look back on the years of waiting, and the frustration, and being told, you're not going to be able to have kids,
Mm,
the way that you thought that you were going to have kids. It's a like you said, like there's just a lot of emotions. But when it comes to praying, I always used to think that prayer was just like you fold your hands and you bow your head and you close your eyes and you talk to God. And
yeah,
yes, that is prayer. Uh, but for me, during those long seasons of grief, it often looked like going for a walk and listening. It often looked like an honest exhale. it sounded like praying something very short, just, God help, amen, or God, I don't know, amen.
Yeah.
All of those very honest prayers, very short. Um, but I just gave God what I had. And sometimes I didn't have the words. Often when we talk about prayer, we talk about when you pray, you just give what you have. You don't
Right.
have to make yourself up for God. He already sees you for who you are. You
That's
don't
right.
have to stifle those emotions. He gave them to you. Um, but, and I also just learned to ask for really, really big things. I was just praying the most bold prayers I could. Every day I would pray that. I would pray for our birth family. For the birth family, I would pray for our child that they would be happy and healthy and that they would know the Lord. And I prayed that God would help us to be ready and to be dependent on him. Like
Yeah.
that was all and I just kept praying that over and over again. Um, yeah. And then I think the biggest thing through it all, and I still do this when I don't know what to pray, I ask my friends if they would pray for me
Yeah.
because I there were times where I was so sad that I didn't want to talk to anybody, let alone God.
Right.
But I did want I knew where I needed to go,
Mm.
and I knew I couldn't take myself there,
Yeah.
even though I was already like in the hand of God, like you know what I'm saying.
Right.
But I think, and then inviting your friends, your people, your community into the thing that you are praying is a very loving thing to do. It is not a selfish thing to do. It is a very loving thing to do.
That's a great point.
Um, and so that's what that, and I'm still praying those big prayers. I'm still praying
Yeah.
all those things. And it just looks a little bit different now. Um, but it wasn't the time wasted. It wasn't a waste of time.
That's right.
I know that for sure.
Hey, friends, I can hardly believe it, but graduation, Mother's Day, and Father's Day are quickly coming. And if you're anything like me, you're searching for the perfect gift to celebrate each one of these special people and occasions in your life. So that's why I'm excited to tell you about the Christian Parenting Moms, Dads, and Grads gift guide that has something for everyone. Whether you're honoring a new mom, a seasoned dad, or a recent grad, Christian Parenting has you covered with thoughtful and meaningful gift ideas. Inside this gift guide, you will find some of our favorite resources from Bibles and study tools to inspiring books, fun projects, and even some special bath products. And you're guaranteed to find something special for the most important people on your gift list this spring. You can visit christianparenting.org/gift guide to get your moms, dads, and grads a gift guide today. And the link is also provided in today's show notes. Now let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, well, and that, that leads into my next question where I'm just feeling led to take this. Like, how are you different? How has God changed you as a result of you having no other place to turn but that kind of prayer and conversation with God?
So I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. Sorry, I was on a different podcast. Uh,
It's okay. No offense taken.
no offense. Okay, good. But it was the very first podcast that I did for the children's book. And the host, she asked, who has been your greatest teacher when it comes to prayer?
Mm,
And I told her it was grief. Like grief has been the greatest teacher for me when it
yeah,
comes to prayer, because grief really showed me like I had nothing and I was struggling and I was hurting. And yet the invitation remained and God was there. You can speak to God at any time about anything, anywhere. It doesn't have to be like, as somebody who really loves words and likes to sound poetic, it doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to be poetic at all.
yeah,
It can just be, like it can be a groan. It can be an honest exhale. It can just be hands open. It can be eyes closed. It can be just laying on a blanket in the grass. Like and you can just be with God.
yeah,
I think a lot of the things that we've come to know get broken down, get burned down, and grow back more beautifully, especially when grief lights the match,
right.
you know?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I uh, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I wouldn't not wish it on anybody because I look back and I see how it is just it's changed everything for me. My faith is so much stronger because of it.
Absolutely.
And also not because my prayer was answered. And that's the
Yeah.
hard part.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's what I would say.
That's beautiful. I love that. And that is, I've alluded to this multiple times on the show, or, ultimately, when we shift our perspective from this place of relationship with God over the result we're asking for, I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the fulfillment of that is, there's not a, for somebody who uses words, and maybe you can put it into words better than I could, but I talk for a living too. And so there's just not a lot to really truly measure that, but the experience of it is just an incredible blessing, and it is ongoing for
Hmm.
sure. As you walk this path, even as an adoptive parent, you experience all the things that come with that. But I really appreciate you sharing that, Tanner. I think it does put a lot of words to what many of our listeners are experiencing even now, and what I can relate to everything that you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
And so from that grief too comes ways to serve others. And I
Yeah.
think that's where it leads into this book that we're talking about today. And so let's talk a little bit about the story of just how this book came to be and the timing of it.
Yeah.
And then we'll lean into just how it serves families.
Yeah. So the book is titled All the Things I Say to God, Learning to Pray Anytime, Anywhere. And it was, so I never thought of myself as a children's author. When I first started writing, I wanted to write like a memoir. I wanted to write like these self-reflective stories and poems and, stuff like that. And
Sure.
then this idea came around the same time when we were diagnosed with unexplained infertility.
Mm,
It seemed like all of our friends were having kids. As soon as the doctor was like, "Hey, it's not looking great," all of our
of
friends were like,
course.
"Here, we're all pregnant." It
Right.
was wild. And it was such a weird time. To you're holding grief and joy together, which is a lot of that season for us. It's where there was a lot of joy in our lives and in the lives of people around us, and then just a lot of grief for the season that we were in.
Yeah.
And so I would, we'd go over and see our friends' kids or our family's kids, and be called Mr. Tanner and Uncle Tanner, and it was
Yeah.
so sweet and so wonderful. And so my wife and I were having a conversation, and eventually got to I was like, well, I'd love to write like a children's book. She kind of asked like, what would it be about? And the answer came pretty fast. It's prayer. Like I just thought I would love to teach all the kids who are calling me Mr. Tanner and Uncle Tanner, like how beautiful and wonderful prayer is, because that was the season that we were in. Like I was spending a lot of time thinking about prayer, and sometimes I was praying and sometimes I wasn't. But it was just that season. And so I thought, and I wrote like 12 different versions of this book. Writing a children's book is harder than I thought. I looked as a writer, I'm like, I could do that. And then it turns
Right.
out it takes a very long time.
Wow.
But I loved writing this book and wrestling with the words and putting the story together. Um, and so now I get to, read this to the kids who call me Mr. Tanner and Uncle Tanner and now Dada.
Yeah.
So I'm super pumped about that, and I just really, I really believe in the story of this book and the conversations that this book will help families have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is amazing. And we need more of that where there's so much noise and so many things that are pulling at our attention as families. There is nothing more important than pointing our kids to Jesus
Mhm.
and teaching them how to pray. And so I love that. So tell us a little bit more about the book, just how that helps families to facilitate those conversations.
Yeah, so the book follows a little girl by the name of Abby, and one day she goes to her mom and she says, Mom, can I pray to God all by myself? She knows how to pray at church and before meals, and all the things. And her mom's like, yeah. And so, Mom, can I pray to God about this and about this and about this? And it just kind of walks through all of that. And there's a couple of nods in this book about adoption. Some of the language around there, and really the book is fun. It's whimsical. It's light. Uh, but it just reminds not only children but the parents who are reading this book, or the aunt or the uncle or the grandparent, whoever is reading this book with their children, like you can talk to God anytime, anywhere, and about anything. and that he is there and that he listens and that he cares. And my hope in prayer for this book is that as children are reading this when they're younger, what is that going to mean for their lives as they continue to get older and experience more of the world, the hard, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the mundane, like all of it. And how can prayer become this foundational rhythm in their life? Um, so that's really like the big hope for this book, and that it would also lead families to have conversations, to pray more together, and to because we've seen, we all when we talk about prayer, the speaker or the pastor is going to say prayer is powerful.
Yeah.
It's because it's true.
Yeah.
Talking to the God of the universe is a very powerful thing.
That's right.
It's a very humbling and beautiful thing as well. And I'm here to say it's going to change everything.
Yeah.
Um,
I would agree.
so I am so excited about this book, and uh, all the parents who've already gotten to read it, and some of the kids who've already read it have. One little girl, I read it at a church, and she came up to me afterwards, and she just looked at me, and she just gave me a nod, and then a little thumbs up, and then she
Oh,
said, "I, Mr. Tanner, I loved it." And I said, "Okay, I'm gonna go cry now. I'll talk to
right.
you
Seriously.
later."
After all the blood, sweat, and tears it took to get here.
Yes, yes. But I mean, and one of the, I've released 4 books of poetry on my own, but this book, with Zonder Kids, and uh, having an illustrator, Anita Schmidt, just crushed it.
Mm,
I'm a terrible artist, so it's just beautiful. And
it
our
is
little
beautiful.
dog Pancake. So the dog in the book is named Mo, but it looks like our dog Pancake. So there's a
I
lot of
love
like
that.
pieces of our life that are in this book.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, so I wrote the book, and I finished writing the book in middle of 2023, and we signed the book contract in August of 2023, and then Judah came home November 2023. So
Wow.
it all like all this was right before Judah.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of sweet like that.
It's very, very sweet. And just how, and that the Lord knew that this was the timeline all along. You know, you talking earlier in your poetry about the Lord not being on time, and he's like, I knew this is how this was going to play out. And
Yeah.
and so it's just beautiful to be on the other side of it and to see that and just how sweet that truly is. And I love one of the pages I got a little sneak peek, y'all,
Hmm.
and one of the pages that he read, it really encompasses the character taking ownership of her
Hmm.
faith for the first time, maybe, and what it means to really pray to God. And so, Tanner, would you share that page with us just as we're kind of
Yes.
closing out our conversation today? It was so sweet and it just really touched me. And the character reminds me a lot of my daughter, just with the questions that she asked and just kind of how that goes. So I was like, that it really hits home
Yeah.
for me as well. So I'm excited for you just to share this little sneak peek with our listeners.
Yeah. So this is the page that always makes me want to cry. It's so towards the end of the book. And the photo, or the spread, is it's mom and dad peeking into Abby's room while she's sleeping with her dog right next to her. And it says, that night before Abby fell asleep, she prayed to God all by herself. Hi, God, it's me, Abby. I love donuts with sprinkles, but I love my mom more. Did you know how much I'd love her when you gave me to her? Thank you for choosing her to be my mom so she could teach me how to pray. And mom whispered, Amen.
Mm, that is so beautiful. And I think as however we become parents, that is our heart to
Yeah.
hear our children affirm that and to be thankful for God's plan in their lives and to start to recognize that. And so I think that is just so incredible. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us. As we're closing out our conversation, I definitely want our listeners to get a chance to know how to follow you further, how to get a copy of the book. But I do want to ask, just in closing, maybe for you just to provide a word of encouragement for everything that you've shared today. You know, this may have really touched on some big feelings for some of our listeners related to their own journeys. And so, just in closing, how would you encourage them?
I would encourage them the way that I would not have wanted to have been encouraged,
Mm,
uh, which is I would encourage you to go and spend some time with the Lord, like honest, real. The way that I have loved to do it in the past is either driving with no music and just talking out loud, or finding the closest woods and walking a trail and praying and talking and just we always like let God have it. He already has it. Just tell him what's going
Right.
on, you know?
Yeah.
That would be, and then I would also say, like, um, you are not forgotten.
Mm.
Like, of all the things that you feel, because I know you probably have felt forgotten or you feel forgotten, you're not forgotten. He sees you and he's listening. It's a heavy and hard and beautiful thing to be a human being. And
Yeah.
I really hope that you get to a point where you can look back and say thank you. Because right
Yeah.
now it feels a lot like why,
Right.
but sometimes that why can turn into a thank you.
That's a good word. Oh my goodness. Tanner, thank you so much for just everything that you've shared today. I've learned so much from you, been blessed by you, and I know our listeners have been as well. They're going to want to know how to follow you further. So, how can they get a copy of the book and stay connected with you?
Yes, the book is titled All the Things I Say to God, and you can find it on Amazon or any bookstore. Uh, Maybe the book comes out April 29th. So if you're listening to this before April 29th, pre-order it. That is super helpful. No author gets upset when you pre-order their book. They actually rejoice twice.
That's
Or
true.
if this comes out, if you're listening to it after April 29th, you still get the book. Or you can get it before and after. It doesn't matter. And then if you want to keep up with my work, my website is writtentospeak.com. I do put a lot of stuff on Instagram and on Substack as well. So if you're looking to follow along, I would encourage you to follow along on Substack and then on Instagram. But if you follow on Instagram, you're not going to see anything because it's just ads. Sorry,
Right.
but I'm not bitter, just a lot. Um, so, anyways, but I would love to say hello to you. So, yeah, feel free to send me a message, and you can do that at writtentospeak.com as well. I'm maybe too easy to get a hold of.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. Okay, so friends, I will have all of those links in today's show notes so that you can just click pause on this interview and head over there and connect with Tanner and be continue to be blessed by him and the work that he is doing. So, thank you so much for just taking the time to share with our families, for being vulnerable, for doing the work that you do. Still think it's the coolest job ever,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I hope that we can continue to stay connected and learn from you further. So,
Yes.
Tanner, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so fun for me. I only almost cried 3 times, which is impressive.
Only
So,
3? I got you beat. I have more than that. It's okay. We'll set a record going forward. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to Called to Love today. I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.